So I have my manually built React application over here and its results on the left. So this is not going to look like what we're going to work on for most of our React studies. For most of our React studies, we're going to use the nice tooling that comes with React to automatically create these components for us and put them in the proper context and architecture. This is just using a flat React bare just directly. So I've included it on the script, the three required script elements on the top here, plus a Babel library, which we'll talk about in a moment. Let's examine our first script tag here. So it's a normal JavaScript tag, and within it we declare this class, which is a React component. So React components are UI components. They represent a section of the UI, and they always have render method. So here's our render method. So this is going to say, well, this is a component. It's a UI component. What are your UI components? Here it is, and the render defines those. So we're going to use React methods here directly. React DOM factory h2. Create an h2 object for us, and hold it here in h2. So this is the content of the h2 element, and we can see it ultimately over here. But this is not enough to render that h2 element on the screen. It just creates one. The next element we create is an image element. React DOM factories image. And here you can see the use of a JSON object to pass a set of parameters into this so that become the attributes for this HTML element, the source and the title. Notice the tooltip. So now we have created two HTML elements. The next thing to do is to put those elements inside a div, and that's what we do here. So we create a div. The render can only return one component. That's not very restrictive, though, if you think about the nature of HTML and the DOM as nested elements. So you return a div that can contain quite a few elements, really unlimited, inside of it. In our particular case, 2 copies of h2 and 2 copies of the image element. So we've defined our component, but we haven't used it yet. And here we use it. DOM.render, React.createElement, and we pass it the component that we've just defined. And then it targets getElement by ID to create the DOM components and insert them directly in here. Notice there's no HTML in here. So HTML is going away, being replaced by JavaScript that directly manipulates the DOM. The next element we're going to see is essentially the same ideas, but we're going to use the Babel transpiler to add some syntactic sugar to our React DOM factories. What does that syntactic sugar take the form of? It takes the form of a language called JSX, JavaScript with XML, or HTML. In our case, HTML, since we're addressing ourselves to the browser. So what this render method is returning is JSX. And then that JSX will be transpiled by Babel into these direct DOM factory calls. So this will become a factory call to create a div, an h2, an image, an h2, and an image, just as we did manually here. We're using an intermediate language that goes to the transpiler to be JSX is the intermediate language. It goes through a transpiler to be translated directly into native JavaScript, which then executes. So it's not on the screen yet until React DOM.render. And here we target our React component. React components are different from HTML components in that they start with a capital letter. That's how React knows that it needs to look for a React component called that. Otherwise it won't look for it. So React components have to start with capital letters. That's the standard for naming classes. It's not required by the language, but React requires it because otherwise it won't be able to identify its components. Capital letter. It must begin with a capital letter. So this says to React instantiate this element and then insert it at app2. here. And so we see the result of that here. So this is getting much more like the code we're going to be learning. Still within automated components and within proper React application structure, but we're working toward that. See you in the next lecture when we'll actually start using React using the tool sets. Thank you.